Hey everybody, it's Brooks here, Senior Pastor, First Baptist Church of the Islands. Thank you for joining me for today's 5 for 5 video devotional. So this week we're talking about the topic of community, fellowship. Either word that you want to use fits right into what we call the discipleship pathway, right? That we're all, as believers, we're on this pathway, this journey, if you want to say that, to maturity, to where God wants us to reflect His Son, Jesus. He wants us to live lives that are effective, that are full, that are abundant. And there's somewhat of a pathway to that. And so we're talking about that pathway over these few weeks. And today, as I mentioned, we're talking about the need for community, or if you want to use the word fellowship, that applies as well. So there's a verse here, 1 John chapter 1 and verse 3. John is writing and he says, "What we have seen and heard, we also declare to you." And he's speaking of what they've seen and heard as it relates to Jesus, his life and ministry. He says, "We also declare to you, so that you may have fellowship with us, and indeed our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ." So 2 layers of fellowship there that John is talking about. One is that layer of fellowship between believers. The other is that fellowship between the believer and the Lord in their relationship with God. So when we think about fellowship as it relates horizontally to other believers, true fellowship is only possible really between believers. I mean, we can work with, hang out with, spend time with, even partner with to some degree those who don't have a relationship with God, and we can have meaningful relationships. But true fellowship from a biblical sense only comes between those who have a common relationship with Jesus. That's where we can truly bear one another's burdens, and where we can help one another and serve one another and love one another at a completely different level, right? Because we know that in a reciprocal way, we're both doing it as a result of our relationship with God. We're doing it for His glory. And so relationships go deeper between those who have a relationship with Christ, who have that common faith. But here's the thing, fellowship takes work. We can't just sit back in a corner with our arms crossed and isolate ourselves from other believers and expect to have meaningful relationship and have biblical fellowship. It takes work. We sometimes have to get out of our comfort zone. Sometimes we have to be a little bit vulnerable, right? And invite people into our lives, invite people into our space. Sometimes we have to be intentional. We have to initiate sometimes that conversation or initiate that relationship. But the best way to find biblical fellowship, many times I believe, is in the context of a local church. That's where you're going to find other believers. That's where you're going to be able to build on the common relationship that you have in Jesus. That's where you can find folks that will pray for you. Those 2 a.m. Christians, right, that you can call at 2 in the morning with a need. They're going to pray for you. It's where you're going to find that opportunity to go deep in fellowship with other Christians that will walk alongside of you, sometimes through the difficulties of life, and sometimes they'll share the mountaintop with you as well. And so I want you to take inventory today of where you stand as it relates to fellowship with other Christians. Do you feel isolated? Do you feel a little bit on the fringe? Do you feel like that's a need? Hey, if so, the first thing to do is to pray for that. Pray for God to bring meaningful Christian fellowship into your life. But then the second thing I would say to do is to take a step towards that fellowship. Take a step towards it in our church even. If you're part of First Baptist of the Islands, visit a grow group if you haven't already. Take a step out of your comfort zone and begin to mold some relationships with other believers. If you're not serving on a ministry team, hey, volunteer to serve on a ministry team. Meet some other believers and begin to cultivate that level of fellowship with other Christians in your life. Hey, it's a necessity. It's part of what it means to be a disciple and a follower of Jesus. God wants you to have it. If you're struggling in that area today, ask God to provide that for you, and I believe He will. Hey, we hope you have a great day today. God bless you.